Hey, yo, it's me, Pops Van Marmalade, and you're watching the Comics-Related Madness Network. Huh? So come get some. CromCon. CromCon.
Your favorite podcast, it's Critical Blast.
Hi, this is Tim TK, host of That Silverline Show on Tuesday. Join us at 11 p.m. Eastern, 8 p.m. Pacific every Tuesday night as we discuss pop culture and the joys of making comics.
And I'm Scott Wakefield, host of Silverline's Wednesday Wham, where we talk about comic books and all kinds of great storytelling, sometimes with incredible guests. And we want you to join us Wednesday nights from 8 to 9 p.m. Eastern. We'll see you there.
I'm Roland Mann, and I host Silverline's Silver Sunday. Join me every Sunday at 8 p.m. Eastern as we make mine Silverline.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Silverline Wednesday Night Wham! Hosted by Scott Wakefield!
Hello, Internet. We are Silverline, and it is Wednesday, and you are right where you should be, right here with us. Thank you for joining us. We have a full crowd tonight, and we're not even all here, the Wednesday Whammers. Some folks
more coming.
Couldn't make it. Hopefully, they'll be able to join us. And we have a very special guest, Mr. Aaron Lopresti is here with us tonight. We will get to him in just a moment. He has run away. We've frightened him already.
No, I got to get some. I'm like living in shadow here. And so
Turn the lights on. Turn the lights on.
Aaron, you need the clear visor, the clear card dealer visor.
Whoa, it got really bright.
Seriously, folks.
Yes, we that's a great line for our show. Seriously, folks. Okay, all right, let's rein it in. I haven't even made an introduction, and I will repeat our customs for Aaron. We like to introduce ourselves because we do like to just talk about ourselves and hear our own voices. Yes, we're all very outgoing people, comic book creators. And we will talk about what we have going on, upcoming projects, maybe a little projects we're working on. We'll try to cover some Silverline items, news, and things in the works. And if you're out there, we always encourage you to comment, ask questions. It doesn't always have to be about what we're talking about, because we don't even talk about what we're talking about the entire time. So ask questions and chime in. And Aaron is here very kindly. If you have questions specifically for him, please ask those. And about his career, about his the way he arts, and what he did to get where he is. And again, I'm going to keep expressing our appreciation for him being here. So thank you, Aaron. And also thank you, Daytona Beach Comic Con, for sponsoring Silverline's live streams. They have set a date, and I did not jot it down. Roland, you got that on the top of your head?
Oh, no, but give me...
Okay, it's September.
Yeah.
So Daytona Beach Comic Con 2021 is happening. So go over to their Facebook page, go to their website, check out the date. I don't know if they have an event created. Haley, I think maybe, did you see an event that you can click on and say, I'm coming, I'm going, I'm interested?
I don't know. I just looked on their website and saw that they had the dates.
So they've got a date. I think they've got a location locked down. So go there, check that out, and mark your calendars and be there, because we will be there. And you can come, hopefully meet a few Silverliners.
18th and 19th.
18th and 19th of September.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Roland. And we do have a review from Martin Piero, Stellar Odyssey, that will be coming up a little later. Some of the folks I know have to bounce mid-show, and Aaron as well. If you've got to bounce, you don't even need to be polite. Just say goodbye, and you can
click that exit button, and we'll
You
go.
guys,
Oh,
thanks.
And that's tonight's show.
And we're out. Thank you, Make Mine, Silverline. Folks, Aaron is the topic tonight. We're going to talk about his career and what he's created, and we'll go all around and talk about art forms and the what goes into the craft and any other silliness that comes up during the show. So I will get the ball rolling and introduce myself. And on my screen, I'm going to go across. I'm going to go over to Tim, then Dean, and I'll try to give you guys some heads up as we go along. My name is Scott Wakefield. I am the co-writer and co-creator of an upcoming Silverline title called Steam Patriots. And I also try to help out, and I do a horrible job of publicity for Silverline. So if you're out there and you've got a blog, a show, a review, or anything like that, and you want to team up in one way or another, help us get our product out there, we will help get your name out there as well. We'd love to chat. So reach out to us for that. I'm going to go over to Tim.
Hi, I am Tim TK. I am the associate editor at Silverline, and that means I mostly just try to not scream as I catch up our blog schedule. I help with our craft series of blogs where we have creators talk about the craft of comic creation. I am also the writer and creator of upcoming book Wolf Hunter, and I produce the Wednesday Night Show.
You do a wonderful job as well. Thank you. Thank you. Dean, then Haley, then Mickey.
Hi, my name is Dean Zachary. I'm a comic book artist and aspiring comic book writer as I'm working on an upcoming Silverline title called Silver Blade. I have been with Silverline for a while and recently rejoined, and I've known Roland since the days of Malibu, way back when. And in fact, he gave me my first break as a comic book artist, which I will be eternally thankful. And I'm just happy to be here with you guys.
Thank you, Dean. Haley, then Mickey, then Tommy.
Right, I'm Haley Martin, and I do my own webcomic called Heroic Shenanigans that I just write and create all myself, and I'm currently working on an upcoming title for Silverline called Bear.
Thank you, Haley. And in Comic Command Central, Mickey Clausen. Oh, you got to turn your sound on, Mickey.
Mickey, you're muted.
Finally, someone who's as challenged as I am with technology.
Tommy, why don't you go ahead and we'll wait for Mickey to...
My name is Thomas Flormonte Jr. I've been doing comics since early 90s. I've worked for pretty much everybody at one point or the other, mostly inking, but I do a lot of writing and coloring, and I also do my own kid hero line of books through my my publishing empire called Inferno Studios. I'm also the co-owner of the #1 printing company of the world, Kablam digital printers. And for Silverline, while I've worked with Roland since, well, Roland helped me. There you go. Roland showing the book, the Kablam book. Oh, Kablam. There you go. Kablam. Yeah. I've been working with Roland from the beginning. Him and Stephen Butler and Mitch Bird, broke me in, I guess, if you were to call it that, in way back in the 90s. And I did some cat and mouse stuff way back then with them, and all kind of stuff for the Ultraverse with Roland when he was an editor there. But currently, now finally getting around, I am, we got done with, I have to write it down because we keep adding things.
Thank you, Tommy.
There you go. The Trumps book, which we kickstarted a couple of months ago. The first book is now done, and you can buy copies at Indie Planet.
And it is beautiful.
And Yep, turned out really good. We've got to work on the second book of that so we can finish it up. But I am currently inking Silverline Team Up featuring Champion and Miss Fury. It is a whole lot of stuff, so I had to write it down. And I am inking the Rejects book with Mr. C. Michael, and I am inking, going to be inking Silverblade with Mr. Dean Zachary.
Awesome.
So. Yep, amongst the, and then all the other stuff. Oh, and I'm in Orlando, Florida. We're supposed to say where we're from.
Oh,
Right?
I forgot. Yeah. I'm up in snowy Western New York. Tim, you're over there in
I'm
Oregon.
I'm in Salami, Oregon.
Dean down there in snowy where?
Snowy Northeast Arkansas.
Haley, where are you right now?
Florida, near
Florida.
Daytona. So
Florida.
Comic-Con in the backyard.
Mickey, are you say something? Can we hear you?
Snap your fingers.
Still can't hear him.
Just can't hear.
I see his mouth moving.
All right.
But I can't hear him.
All right. So we got Rory next, and we'll go to Brent, and then see Michael.
Hello, I'm Rory Boyle, co-creator of Steam Patriots, along with our illustrious Scott Wakefield. You can find us in all the usual places. I think we're on Facebook and the Gram, right?
We are there.
And he has the coolest microphone.
Yeah, he's got a real mic.
Very professional. Very professional.
It's so Scott and I can be twinning.
Spinning the classics.
That's right. Good morning, Vietnam.
Up late with Rory Boyle.
Silverline After Dark.
Brent, go ahead. Oh, wait, Brent.
You're muted too.
I'm totally messing with you. Anyway, okay.
Cut him off.
There goes
cut
the
him off.
vibe.
Yes.
Tim, you can control him, right? Cut his mic.
My name is Brent Larson. I am a filmmaker here in Orlando, Florida, non-snowy Orlando, Florida, possibly the only place in the country. My pipes, my electricity is totally fine. For those of you out there, I'm sorry that we just have it so good. So sorry.
You're so mean.
Yes, I feel bad. Everyone dumps on
If you
Florida
look at the
for
United
once, we're like,
States, everything is
suck it.
Yeah, everything is blue except for Florida, which is red.
Yeah. I'm the writer and creator of the Silverline book Kalis, which is issue 4 is actually now 3/4 of the way. So that's awesome. Great. The other book I'm working on, I'm the writer and creator of, is Cape Town, which is actually also coming along really well. So first issue. So
fantastic.
Very excited.
I'm sorry, I didn't want to cut you off, Brent. You good?
I'm good.
All
I
right.
can keep talking if you want. I'm under the impression we just have all the time in the world.
We know. Thank you. I'm kidding. You say good things. 100% good. See, Michael.
Hey, I'm Michael Lanning. I am an independent artist currently working as a penciler for the Silverline Rejects. Coming to you from Santa Claus's new summer home, Louisiana.
The new North Pole.
Right. Also, I have a 6-page story in the Enter the Continuum Kickstarter that's going on right now. If you check that out.
Yes.
And that's it for right now. Who knows what else is, other projects I can't talk about right now, but coming up.
You can tell us.
Yes.
Nobody's listening. It's just us, right?
Oh, wow.
Nobody's listening.
Mickey, you switched computers down there?
Yeah.
Oh,
Hey.
Good to have you.
Thank you. Yeah, my Helion, I got one of those little attached cameras and it doesn't work, I guess, the microphone.
Oh.
So
well, you look good.
I use for school, so it works.
Go ahead and say hello. Tell us about yourself.
I'm an inker and colorist for Silverline. I am coloring Twilight for them. Stuff you see, I work for other studios, so I do a lot of freelancing, doing PandaCon and Action Mice, Fire Frogs for Galestone Media and a couple other studios too. So always busy, teach high school during the day, 3D animation, graphic design, and stay up all night doing comics.
And sleep when you're dead.
That's right.
Yeah, usually till 1, 2 in the morning. So.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Mickey. And you're not a regular on the Wednesday night, so try to keep up. I try to keep up as the host. So, Roland, before we get on to Aaron, did you want to say hello? And do you want to talk about Silverline, or do you want me to kind of?
I'm just crashing for a little bit so Aaron could make sure he sees a familiar face before I bail. Since I invited him onto the Wednesday Wham, I'm like, well, I better show up a little bit, yeah.
And then you want to bail him. You can hold his hand, bring him, introduce.
No. It's Aaron and I go way back. Way back to the Malibu days. I'm curious and interested if anyone's going to ask him questions about Sludge and Malibu, the Ultraverse, Steve Gerber, his editor that he worked with at the time. I'm curious to see if anyone's going to ask him any questions. Because oh, look at that! Oh, that's great! Oh, wow!
Me and Gerber.
It's a young Aaron,
wow.
yeah, young Aaron with Gerber, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Happen to have that sitting there. That wasn't planned.
Just so
Not at all.
Yeah.
Nope.
Yeah. Gerber was a special kind of guy. So no, Scott, you're the host, man. Like I said, I'm just gonna hang out for a few minutes and then I'm gonna bail.
Thank you. So, folks out there, you can see we've got an awesome crew tonight, and this is just a little snapshot. This is one of 2 shows we have. We have a Sunday night show. We have so many people working on so many projects for Silverline, and it is awesome, and it is really cool to just hear this title, that title, this title, that title. If you want to check out our current slate of titles, you can go to silverlinecomics.com, and you can see everything but the last 2 titles, Switchblade and Teen Beetle. Those are not available to purchase just yet. But if you
Boom.
Kickstarter campaign, those will be coming your way very soon. Thank you, everybody, for supporting those. And that just means we can keep creating amazing stories. Brent down there said Kalis number 4 is on the way. That's so cool. We got a story arc going. It's just one example. And we're trying to do every other month, trying to get 2 out at a time. That may change, we'll see. But right now, we're doing the best we can to get 2 out at a time because we got so much good stuff.
It may change to 3.
Okay. So we'll see. It's so many cool things, and we are going to talk about the industry with Aaron and folks that have worked in the traditional, come in and do the work at the magic land of comic books, but also how now things are changing. And we got Dean over there working from home, and C. Michael and Haley and Tommy and Mickey and all of us, and making these independent stories. And before we started, Dean, I want you to talk about it too. We talked about what's so great about the independent world and having these new ideas, these fresh ideas, and having the ability to just do something crazy and new, something unique. We're not downplaying the big guys, and because they make amazing stuff, but it's a neat world to be part of in the independent world. So we've talked this whole time. Aaron has been wonderfully patient. Aaron, I'm going to give you the floor. Introduce yourself. Give us your bio, your background, and feel free to talk as much as you want. You have the floor. And then give us I'm on somebody's show there too.
That was a little bit of an echo.
Yeah. So go ahead and if talk as much as you want. We want to learn about you, and then we'll pepper you with questions. All right.
All right. Well, my name is Aaron Lopresti. I am a penciler, inker, writer, colorist, occasional painter. Worked in the industry since about 92, 91, maybe. I was just thinking before I came on that I've actually been making a living drawing since 1990. I started out in commercial art, was there for a couple of years in a studio here in Portland, Oregon. And while I was trying to break into comics, I got a little bit of a late start because I went to film school at USC. I was kind of wanted to pursue that, and that didn't work out at least as quickly as I wanted it to. So I bailed and said, you know what, I'm going to try and get back into comics, which was my original goal when I was 12. So I eventually was able to do that. I've worked on a variety of projects for a variety of publishers, probably best known for my work on Planet Hulk, Wonder Woman. I had a run on Ms. Marvel, Justice League International. I started off at Marvel, but then jumped ship to go to Malibu with Roland and crew because they offered me twice the page rate that Marvel was at the time. So I was like, wow. Yeah, I'll do that. And sorry, my dog is
a lot of money in those days in comics, right?
Well, it's funny. I was just having this conversation with some people that I think our original page rate mine was like $85, right? A page. Mm-hmm. And then you guys came along, Dave Ulbrich and Tom Mason talked to me at a Dragon Con.
Yeah.
And I happened to be sitting next to Mark Bagley because I had done Spider-Man's origin story in the that 365, the black hologram cover issue of Spider-Man. And so I was sitting next to Bagley, and of course, he had a line a mile long, and I was just kind of catching a little overflow. my dog is literally biting the sleeve of my and Dave and Tom came up and started talking to me and told me what they were doing, and I had no idea about what, you know, the characters or anything that they were working on. And but as they sent me the package of material, the different designs and things like that, and you know, said, yeah, we'll pay you $135 a page. I was like, what? Okay. So and I didn't really have anything going over at Marvel. I had been offered She-Hulk, but then by an editor that was working there. But then John Romita Sr., who was the art director, came in and said, no, he's not ready for a regular series. So I kind of got pulled out from underneath me. And he was right. But at the time, I didn't think so. Right. And so I was very eager to go someplace else where people had a little bit of faith in me. And I was able to sort of, by working on Sludge, which wasn't originally what I was supposed to be working on. I was supposed to be working on Hard Case.
Yeah.
Because that was one of the launch books for them. And then, but we were at Fred Greenberg's New York show there in the Javits Center a couple of years before he, you know, the snowstorm that bankrupted him. And they had their whole book full of character designs. And then there was a Kevin Nolan piece in there from, you know, he had designed for Sludge. And I remember talking to, who was it? Chris Olm, I guess. I'm like, dude, this is what I want to do. And he's like, no, we need you to launch, you know, in a Hard Case. I'm like, I really want to do this. And so he finally relented and gave that to me, and they found someone else to do Hard Case. But the interesting thing was, when I was working at Marvel doing these backups and things early in my career, I was under so much pressure. I felt like if I screwed this up, it was it, you know? So it was like every job was like so important, and yet I didn't really have a clear understanding of what they wanted from me. So I was really, some of the worst work I've ever done. Now, granted, it was some of the first work I ever did too, so that makes sense. But I got fired twice from Marvel, and then I did new samples, and they showed them to them. They're like, okay, this is more like it, you know. And then I would get the actual job, and then I would just suck because it was just, the pressure was just immense. And so when I went over to Malibu, all the guys were just kind of like, yeah, man, do what you do. And so it totally took the pressure off me. And I, at that time on Sludge, just started doing some really interesting things in storytelling. And it was the first real professional looking work I had done up to that point, and sort of changed the trajectory of my career. And so I've always been grateful to you guys for giving me that opportunity, and as well as just, and then sort of getting out of my way and saying, hey man, go for it.
Yeah.
And so it was very liberating, and it really helped me out a lot in terms of getting better and establishing my career in the industry. But yeah, so Malibu, I did a short term at CrossGen, done some image stuff. DC, obviously I've been at DC for the last darn near 10 years. And, but I haven't really done anything for them since September, because the craziness going over there, you know, we're all kind of sitting around watching them implode and assuming that Marvel's not far behind.
You're one of the ones on the list that's going to buy them, right?
I'm one of the fans with the, I got a ton of money off my Sludge royalties that I saved.
So get in line.
Yeah. So actually the last few months I've been doing a ton of commissions, selling original artwork, and doing some covers for some of the smaller, you know, independent companies like Dynamite and Aftershock and Archie, which I guess Archie isn't really a small company, but and doing some stuff like that, and trying to get my own stuff going. So it's been quite a wild ride actually, but this isn't the first time I've had a few months where I haven't had any work from the big two. It's happened to me a couple times in the past, and you just kind of, you know, when you're a freelancer, you just kind of ride out the storm, and stuff eventually pops up. So
kind of roll with it. So I'm going to jump in and ask the first question. What is the status of Garbage Man?
You know, it's interesting that you should ask me that. I do have a deal. It is coming out later this year, but the publisher was like, don't talk about it until we solicit it. And I'm like, That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard in my life. I keep
That'll
talking
help
about
yourselves,
it
right?
constantly so that when you do solicit it, people know that it's coming. So I've been sort of cheating. I've been talking about it, but I haven't been saying who's publishing it.
I gotcha.
So it's, I had to go back in. For those who don't know, it was a miniseries, 2 miniseries actually, that I did for DC Comics, but it was a creator-owned book. And recently the rights returned to me, well, probably 2 years ago now. And it has Batman in it. So I've had to remove Batman and put my own characters in there to replace Batman. Thankfully, I have some characters that kind of fit really nicely into that mold. So it wasn't this jarring thing that I took Batman out and put these characters in. But so that's what I've been doing this past fall, as well as getting the pages that needed to be redrawn, the panels that needed to be redrawn so that, you know, Batman was removed, and all references to Gotham and all that kind of stuff. And it's not in there a ton, but there's enough. I think ended up being, out of 115 pages of story, there was, I think, 18 separate pages that either had word balloon changes or art changes on them. So I got those repenciled. I got those sent to Matt Ryan, who is the anchor on it, and who I've worked mostly with most of my career since my CrossGen days. And so he's inked them. I got them to the colorist. They're colored. And just a couple days ago, they got lettered. So everything is over at the publishers. And now it's just kind of a matter of waiting for them to solicit it so that I can officially talk about it. But it will be out later this year, like either October or November, a trade paperback that collects the whole thing. But the interesting thing about it is it actually has new material in it as well. So it's a reprint of the stuff that came out with the new material in it. So.
And it's all 100% yours now, right?
Yes,
Excellent.
That is correct.
I have a quick question for you, Aaron, on that.
Yes,
I was reading on your website about Garbage Man, and I want to get a little bit into the conceptual part of it. You know, what I found interesting was you stated you wanted to do a monster as a superhero rather than what Alan Moore had done with Swamp Thing, which was turned it into sort of this esoteric, you know, swamp god type thing. And I thought that was interesting that you wanted to do a monster as a superhero, because you had this cool iconic cover and it reminded me of Creature from the Black Lagoon, right? And because I'm a classic Universal Monsters fan also. And yeah, and so it sort of took me back to that, and I was like, I gotta find out, like, what got you going? Was it a Swamp Thing kind of inspiration? Was it a creature inspiration? How did he come about?
Well, most people that are familiar with me, are familiar with my work, know that I'm a big, you know, Bernie Wrightson honk. And,
absolutely, yeah.
It's funny how you don't really see his influence in my work until I start doing monster stuff, and then it becomes clear as day. You know, it's just I do superhero stuff, and it's like you're going to see more probably Neil Adams, and you're going to see Bernie Wrightson in my stuff. But you look at my monster stuff, and you go, "Well, I can see the Wrightson influence there. It's pretty obvious." What happened was when I first went over to DC, I was at Marvel, and I had done Planet Hulk, and I was doing Ms. Marvel, and I just wrapped up Ms. Marvel, and I was supposed to take over Ultimate X-Men. And I told them I wouldn't do it unless they gave me the cover gig, because I had not done the covers on Ms. Marvel, and it was really ticked me off. And so they said, well, we don't know, you know, can you do a sample? And so I said, yeah. And I got halfway through the sample, and I said, what am I doing? I got so pissed at myself, and then I got pissed at them. I finished the sample. I sent it to them. They go, this is great. You can do cover. I said, nah, I'm quitting. And that's what I did. And, but I also had a Man-Thing project over there that I was pitching them. It would have been, pardon the expression, just a one-issue giant-sized Man-Thing. And they were like, yeah, we can do that. But they just kept putting it off, you know, so I never got around. So I got, you know, there was a couple things going on there. But anyway, so when I went over and was talking to Dan DiDio, I said, look, one of the things I want to do is write. I said, not all the time. I don't want to write every project I'm on, but I do want the opportunity to do that once in a while. And he goes, I don't care. That's fine. And so we were talking a little bit more, and he goes, we need a monster book, because at the time Swamp Thing was being held captive by Vertigo. Okay. And this is something I never really understood. They're the same company, but they're not the same company. So it was like they had the rights to Swamp Thing, and they wouldn't give it back to DC for the use in the regular DCU at the time. So, and Dan really DC doesn't have a Hulk character. They don't really have a monster character other than Swamp Thing, and they didn't even have Swamp Thing at the time. So I said, well, Dan, that's right up my alley. Let me come up with something. And my feeling was, I was a big Swamp Thing fan, as a kid, and I'm not a big horror fan. Okay, so I won't go and see just like disgusting horror films, but I do love monster movies. And I look at the monster films, like like you were talking about. Those to me are not horror films; they're monster films. I guess vampire films could get a little bit into what we consider a horror film, but Wolfman and Creature from the Black Lagoon, Frankenstein, those are monster films to me. And that's kind of what I wanted to do. This, Alan Moore got into some weird, esoteric, creepy stuff, and other people have done some really disgusting things with the character, and it just gets it just not very appealing to me. But I always liked what Wrightson did. I was like, oh, he fights a monster this month. Next month he fights a werewolf. After that, the alien shows up. And him and Len Wein were, to me, that was kind of like, you've got the monster is the protagonist. He is the superhero. I mean, he's stronger than everybody else. He's built like a superhero. He just deals with monsters as opposed to supervillains. And so that was kind of the take I wanted. I wanted to do something classic without reinventing the wheel, but at the same time, I wanted to make it familiar, but not a ripoff. And so I kind of took, I don't know if you'd call it standard, but a basic origin story where somebody gets injected with chemicals and there's an explosion and they reform and, that kind of thing. Yeah. Obviously, who the guy was is different than, the other characters that were turned into swamp creatures. So that part of the story is different, but the actual creation of the character, I just wanted people to be able to kind of step right in and go, hey, we don't have Swamp Thing, but we have Garbage Man. Let's read that. And so that was kind of the inspiration behind doing it. And originally it was going to be its own series. And then Dan chickened out and he goes, let's make it a mini series. I'm like, okay, that's fine. And then he chickened out and said, well, why don't we run it as a backup in the Batman books? And I thought, well, what, that's a great idea because I'll get great exposure, right? And then that changed. And he goes, okay, well now, and it ended up being the worst possible scenario. We're going to run it in an anthology miniseries. I'm like, I don't even know if that's a real thing. What is that? And so then they had, for those of you that are as old as me or close to as old as me, remember DC had a series called Weird Worlds back in the early 70s that were all Edgar Rice Burroughs stuff, right? Well, they had to re-up the copyright on that title. So he's going, okay, well, we'll do the first miniseries will be Weird Worlds. I'm like, whatever. And so then we'll do a second miniseries, and it was My Greatest Adventure, right? So they wanted to get My Greatest Adventure back out there. So I had a story in there. Kevin McGuire had a story on this alien girl that was sort of superhero humorous kind of thing that was really quite good, and called Tanga. And then they ran a Lobo story. So we basically, all of us had 10 pages, and that went through 6 issues, that 6-issue miniseries, Weird Worlds. So we all ended our stories on these cliffhangers, except for Lobo, that wrapped up. But Kevin and I ended our, because every 10-page segment had to kind of like leave you hanging to, like Marvel Comics Presents or whatever used to be. Right? And so then we finish it, the Weird Worlds thing, we're ready to jump into the next issue. And he's like, well, he goes, we're doing My Greatest Adventure, but it's not going to come out for another 4 months. And so we had these cliffhangers that were, 60 pages that we'd built through the 6 issues. And then we got this cliffhanger, and now we got to wait 4 months before the next issue comes out. Of course, by the time it did, everybody had forgotten about it, and sales were horrible and blah, blah, blah. But that was that's how that all came about.
You're making the case for independent comics. You just, that was it right there. Everybody, everybody's listening. Yes. This is why you do independent.
Yes. Create on your schedule.
And for the record, last thing I'll say about So other people, but I love your bright, your clean superhero stuff. That's much more Adam Hughes-ish, right? Beautiful work, but I love the grit and I love the textures of the Bernie Wrightson-esque stuff. You know, where you're more on the Kelly Jones end of the spectrum, and it gets all weird and it doesn't have to be so bound to real reference, because I'm always in that tug of war between, okay, here's my photo reference, but I want it to have an atmosphere, a feel to it. I want it to have guts, I don't want to just draw a pure reference, I want it to have a vision look to it. But anyway, I love your Wrightson-esque stuff.
Thank you.
So
just
my opinion.
I always look at Wrightson and guys like Wrightson, Barry Smith, Frazetta. Frazetta, I probably really shouldn't count because he did a little bit of comic work, but not really a great deal. But he was also a big influence. But, when I was growing up in the 70s, the stuff that was hot at that time was not really the superhero stuff. It was the monster stuff. It was the fantasy stuff. Yes. Lord of the Rings. Everybody was doing artist portfolios and things like that. That was so I always sort of wanted to fashion myself after being not a comic book artist, but an illustrator, right? And I always looked at Wrightson and Barry Smith and Cluda and Frazetta. Those guys were illustrators that just happened to be drawing comics once in a while. And that's kind of how I sort of patterned my style. And so when I do fantasy stuff, when I do horror stuff or monster stuff, I guess I should say, that comes out because it seems to me there's a certain level of freedom and detail that you can put into a monster story or fantasy story that you're a little bit more restricted when you're doing a superhero book. David Finch seems to be able to sidestep that because no matter what he's drawing, there's always heavy shadows and a lot of detail, I don't look at it that way. It's like if I'm drawing Superman, I'm not going to draw him with tons of shadow on him, like you would Batman. And so therefore you have more of an open style, like Adam or any number of guys. And that's sort of that's kind of the approach I take. I mean, I would put them in shadow when I had to for thematic purposes or if the actual practical lighting called for it. But I'm not going to, if Superman's out flying through the sky in the middle of the day, I'm not going to put heavy shadows on him, Right. Whereas if you're doing a monster book, 90% of the book, it's usually at night, so you have all these shadows, or usually someplace with gnarled trees or, weird castles and things you can really sort of go wild with. Whereas, I don't feel that sort of same kind of illustrative freedom when I'm working on superhero books. So I kind of approach it differently.
Good call.
The end.
We got
for somebody to
I'll jump in with some input from chat.
I'm gonna take this opportunity to bail, Tim. So
all right.
I'll jump back on at the very end, and what I'll do is I'll announce our guest for Sunday. So,
okay. All right,
Aaron, thank you so much. You and I'll be in contact over the interwebs stuffs. So thanks a lot. I'll leave you to the mercy of these fellas.
All right,
Haley.
Let's see you rolling. Tim, go for it.
Waiting to see if Roland kills the chat. Okay, we're still here. All right. The first one here from YouTube. Someone is asking about your time at Soulsun or Soulsun Comics.
Who?
Someone is asking if you worked with Soulsun, the imprint put together by it wasn't imprint, but Sol Brodsky.
No.
All right.
I've never even heard of it.
I thought it was a little strange, so I didn't know either. The other one was from that same person.
He probably thinks I'm somebody else. That happens
Probably,
a lot.
yeah. Have you considered drawing Count Chocula and Frankenberry for General Mills?
I would love to. They haven't really. I was so jealous when was it Jim Lee, Terry Dodson, and Dave Johnson did those newer versions.
Right.
I was like, oh, I wanted to do that so bad. And the reason this person is, it's probably Kirk Spencer or somebody, but I did some sketches on one of my virtual cons I did
Okay.
over this past year of Frankenberry and Count Chocula. So that's, I'm sure, why that. I haven't done Quisp yet though, so maybe I'll do Quisp next. Although he's not part of that, group of monsters, but classic cereal.
Of course.
Oh yeah.
But I would, hey, if the General Mills said, hey, I'd do it. So.
Right.
Although I don't think that was really a serious question, but
Right. No, but yeah, on an actual serious question, and something that I also have reference to, but Aaron Humphreys, who is another West Coast-based Silverliner, he actually lives up in Vancouver. He was asking about your time on X-Men, that being his first time coming across your artwork.
I have a tragic story about this. I guess when you're in the industry as long as I've been, you got a lot of tragic stories. A couple of success stories, but mostly tragic. I had done a book for DC called Tachyon, and it was abysmal. Okay, now I'm going to defend myself a little bit and say that I'm just going to blame the writer, but because I thought I did some really good storytelling and some, it was kind of a next step for me after Sludge artistically, but the book just tanked. And as a result, I got blacklisted over at DC, right? And I had never really had been able to make inroads back into Marvel after I originally left them to go to Malibu. And so this is one of the periods of times I spoke about earlier, where I was like 3 months where I had no work. And I was, calling and begging and, Scott Dunbier over at Image threw me a couple bones to keep me alive. I did a Spawn pinup courtesy of Bo Smith, and got way overpaid for it, because I was just literally had no work. And but I kept sending stuff and I kept talking to people and kept making phone calls, because we didn't have the internet back then. This would have been early 90s. Well, mid 90s, excuse me, about 96, 97 ish. And what was the question again?
Just asking about your time on X-Men.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah.
So I had sent some stuff. I had gone to San Diego and shown samples to the two editors that were at X-Men at the time, which was Pete Franco was the associate editor, and oh God, I can't think of the guy, but it was back when they were all in their black, leather period. And so they called me up and said, hey, do you want to do an annual? And I said, well, yeah. And I said, are the X-Men actually in it? Because back then they were notorious for, they would call people to do annuals and whatever. And you go, oh yeah, an X-Men annual. Then you find out that none of the characters are in the annual, or one of them is, and they're in street clothes the whole time, and so I said, are they actually in it? And he goes, well, they're not in costume. I said, nah, forget it. And which took a lot of guts for me to do because I was unemployed, but I was like, I'm not going to keep going down this road of being a fill-in artist on bad books. So I thought, well, I just blew that, but at least I had my, saved myself, my integrity, right? Well, they called back a little bit later and said, hey, we've got 3 issues of fill-ins on X-Men. Would you like to do them? And I'm like, yeah. And they got me Mark Morales, who's going to ink, who's obviously one of the top inkers, right? So I was like, holy crap, this is going to be awesome. So I did these 3 issues of X-Men, and actually Danny Mickey stopped in and helped out a little bit too. And during that period of time, I also got this Wizard special order comic, X-Men comic, Ultimate X-Men comic that Jeff Johns had written, and Danny Mickey inked. So once again, I had another one of the top inkers in the field over me, right? So I did this work for about this 4-month period of time, and it was just, at the time, it was by far and away the best stuff I'd ever done. It looked great because I had great inking. And I remember I was talking to Pete Franco, and he calls me up and he says to me, Aaron, we really like what you're doing. He goes, we are going to groom you to be the next big X-Men artist, right? So those are the words that literally came out of his mouth. So you can imagine me just going, finally, finally, I've made it. I'm going to be huge. I'm going to be the next Jim Lee, blah, blah, blah. A week later, they both got fired. And I was out on my ass, pardon the expression, right? So here I was about to be the next superstar X-Men artist. And then I went, and a week later I was unemployed. And that's when I ended up going to CrossGen, because Bart Sears had approached me and I had nothing going on, right? And so that's why I went and did CrossGen. But what I later found out, you'll find this kind of funny, is I was sitting next to Ethan Van Sciver at a Phoenix show years ago, and he was telling the story about how he was the guy who got those 2 editors fired. And I'm like, what? And he tells me the story that he wrote, some 4-letter word, snuck it in there because he was pissed at Mark Powers, was the editor, and Pete Franco was the associate. Yeah. And he was pissed at Powers for something. I can't remember what it was. So he wrote this in there to get him fired. And he was celebrating the fact that he fired him. And I go, you screwed my career, So I was like running over the table, my hands are on his throat kind of thing. And he's like, you did fine. You're all right. And, but yeah, so that I often, sit around and think, wow, what would have happened if Ethan Van Sciver hadn't been, done that, and those guys hadn't got fired? Where would I be right now?
Where would you be now?
Yeah, I might be right here. Who knows? But I know I would have had a few more issues of X-Men under my belt anyway. So
what was CrossGen like, Aaron? I mean, did there was a big, I don't know whether the story was true, but the idea of CrossGen was that they were going to return to the classic bullpen, and everybody was going to move down to Florida and be in the same room, and it was going to be the classic style. And did all that actually happen? And if it did, how long did it last?
It actually did. And the interesting thing is, Mark Alessi, the owner and the founder, he was under the impression that there actually was a bullpen at Marvel, and there really wasn't. That was just kind of Stan Lee's sort of like imaginary sort of, the workplace that didn't really exist. And so he told this story, or someone told me, that he'd heard it from Mark, that he had gone to Stan Lee and said, hey, we're recreating your model, and Stan Lee was like, well, we never actually did that. That was just BS, and so now my dog's barking at the front door. Anyway, so I apologize if you hear my dog barking back there, but so he had created this environment that was really awesome, because we had writers, artists, inkers, colorists, were all under the same roof in the same office, right? And we were in these little, I wouldn't say cubicles, but yeah. And so it was awesome because the writers, there was no editors. The writers would get together and have story conferences and figure out what they were going to do. And they sort of kept each other in check, right? And then I would go and meet with my writer, who was Tony Bedard at the time on Mystic. And he'd tell me the story, we'd discuss it, and his idea. Then he'd come up with a plot based on our conversation and what he wanted to do and a little bit of what I wanted to do. So we were, on the same page. And then I'd get the plot, and then I'd pencil the thing, and then I'd take my penciled page, walk over to Matt Ryan, who was inking me, and say, this is what I'm going for here. Do this, or don't do that, or approach it this way, or don't approach it that way. He would ink it. I would then take the inked page over to the colorist, who is Will Quintana, and say, Will, this is what I'm going for here. Go this direction, go that direction, whatever. I mean, I didn't micromanage anybody, but I was able to tell them if I had a specific idea, I want to go this color scheme because we're trying to get this point across, or whatever. And it was amazing. Everybody that worked there produced their best work of their careers, and it was because we had that sort of work environment where everybody was on the same page. And if we weren't, we could sit down and talk it out and figure everything out. The problem with that is all you guys can probably guess, is that it's not a very good economic model. Okay. Right. We all were getting paid salary. We were getting health benefits. We're getting all the stuff that you don't get as freelancers. Right. And so, and then of course they expanded too quickly, which is always the case with new startup publications. And pretty soon there was more money going out than was coming in, and the whole thing blew up. But it lasted, I worked for them for about 2 years, just barely. And I remember telling my wife, because we lived in Oregon, and which I hate, by the way, but we live in Oregon, and so we were going to move to Florida, which she wasn't thrilled about. But I was like, yeah, we got to go where the business is, right? So we moved to Florida, and I said, if we get 2 years out of this, we'll be lucky. And that's about exactly what we got. Now, it had been around a year and a half before I joined, so I was kind of like the second wave of talent that they brought in. But so I worked for them like 6 months before I moved to Florida, because we had to sell our house and all that kind of stuff. And then I lived in Florida, worked there for a year where everything was going really well. And then it was that second year in Florida where things started to fall apart. And then I was, calling Marvel, while working at CrossGen, because I knew things were going under. And so I was actually drawing Captain Marvel issue while I was finishing up my commitment at CrossGen at the same time. And so it was a brutal 6 months, because I was actually working 2 jobs at the same time, and it was a lot of hours, long days. But it was a great idea. And it might have lasted if Mark hadn't been so aggressive, and just kind of, because all the books were selling in that 18,000 to 27,000 circulation, which was enough to sustain the books. Barely, but enough, but they just kept expanding, and
yeah, he was spending a lot of money.
Leadership to support that many titles.
Yeah, and do you think if we'd had the internet the way it is now, the technology the way it is now, and he had not chosen to bring everybody under the same roof, but to network everyone like we're doing with Zoom and so on, do you think things might have been different?
Ultimately, no, because I think always the biggest problem everybody has when they start publishing is overexpansion.
Okay.
And that seems to be, it's kind of like when you start doing sequels and superhero movies, everybody for some god awful reason wants to throw every villain they can think of in the sequels, and realize that's not what made the first movie popular. You don't have enough time or room to jam all these people in here. You're going to ruin the movie. And they continually do it. And it's the same thing with comic publishing. Every time there's a new company, they just pour into the market, and the market it's not that big of a market, so you have to sort of bide your time with a few titles here and there. But that's a long-term plan to make a little bit of money, and everybody wants to make a lot of money very quickly. So I think he would have saved money up front, certainly, and probably would have got longer life out of it. But I think it probably would have ended up with the same fate.
Same way. Okay.
He still would have ended up doing the same thing, which is expanding. And who knows, without the overhead, he might have expanded quicker. So.
And then they bought like a MegaCon. You remember they purchased that, or did they? They had a big stake in it, and then they had a bunch of educational programs that they were doing. They spent a lot of money. I think they spent, like you were saying, more money than was coming in.
Well, I think, it's too bad Roland took off, because I think the same thing was partially to blame at Malibu. Is they tried, you try to hit the industry with a bang and say, we're going to do all this stuff that no one else is doing. But if you do it before you get a certain amount of profit in, you're just digging yourself into a hole and hoping you get out of it. And I guess whoever was doing their video games screwed them over. And that's the other thing, when you're dealing with that big of a project with that many different tentacles going out, you got to be really careful that the people you're working with are not going to screw you over. And that's kind of hard to know if you don't, you just jump into, well, this guy can do video games, let's work with him. Well, he might screw you over. And that apparently is what happened there. And so they spent a lot of money, Malibu did. They initially had it because of the Image books, but, and their books launched well, but, you got all that other stuff going outside too quickly, and something goes wrong, and then suddenly all that capital is gone and you've got nothing. And that's, so I think it's a sad, but a familiar story with independent, smaller publishers a lot of the time.
Have you considered writing a tell-all book about the industry?
My stories aren't really that good. I mean, I'm not all that sociable, because I'm sort of in a weird age bracket, because I should have broke in about the same time, somebody like Art Adams did. But I ended up breaking in at this, like Terry Dodson's a perfect example. I broke in at the same time Terry did, and I am 10 years older than Terry. Okay, because where most people, you know, they had a clear vision. I'm going to be a comic book artist, or I'm going to be an illustrator, or whatever. And so they get out of high school, maybe they go to a couple of years of art college or whatever, and then they jump into the industry. I went to film school. I got, you know, and that was something I pursued for like 6 years, and I hardly drew at all in that 6 years. So here I am at, you know, what was I finally got out of film school in 88. Okay, so I was 24 years old, you know, where a normal person would have graduated college would have been 21. So I'm already 3 years past, and I didn't take an art. I mean, I took a couple art classes to keep my hand in it, but I didn't really, that's not what I was studying. So here I am, you know, 24, pushing 25 years old, really haven't drawn seriously for 7 years since my senior year in high school, trying to break into the art industry, and I sucked. And if I had, and it took me just years to get back, catch up to where I should have been if I'd been diligently pursuing it, you know, right out of high school. So I do kind of regret that, although I had a blast at film school, I can't lie. But so the point I'm making is that, so I'm sort of in this weird age group where I should be, you know, I should have broke in with Art Adams in 84 or 85. Instead, I ended up breaking in 90, 91 with 92, 93 with Terry Dodson and those guys. So, and although I'm really good friends with Terry, most of that crowd is 10 years younger than me. So they don't really want to hang out with me. And then the guys that, like, you know, Art Adams, those guys are their own group because they broke in together and I wasn't part of that crowd. So I don't have like a lot of parties that I went to and that type of stuff. So, I mean, I have some funny stories where I was, you know, mistook for Adam Hughes or whatever, and dumb things like that. But I don't really have a lot of, you know, dirt that I could spill, you know, in a tell-all book. In a lot of ways, I've always been sort of on the outside looking in. So, and then I pursued friendships with people like Mike Plug and Walt Simonson and Bernie Wrightson and guys like that I grew up admiring. So instead of like networking with people close to my own age, and you know, I'm networking with guys that were, you know, 15, 20 years my seniors, and those are people I'm friends with, you know, so it's weird.
But have you ever had your portfolio reviewed by Neil Adams?
Yes, I have.
As have I. We'll talk about that over a beer sometime. Seriously. that was really weird.
At Continuity in LA. So when I was out of film school and I thought I should start pursuing art again, he had opened up offices in LA, and I actually went in and I was just like, Neil Adams. I was just freaking out and sitting across the desk as he's ripping me to shreds. Actually,
yeah.
He was actually really nice about it, but he was, you know.
Oh, it's brutal. It's like the most brutal coach you could ever have.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, he pulls no punches, but I'll have to admit, everything he said was true, and it made me work harder, and I became a better artist because he ripped me to shreds. You know?
Yeah, Mark Waid ripped me to shreds too when he was editing at DC. So when I was trying to break into comics, so I've been ripped by the best, man.
That's how you grow.
And that's the title of your book.
The best.
So on the chat, I think Scott has just been sitting still for too long. It's because Scott Merrill on Facebook accused our Scott of being a cardboard cutout.
Oh,
wow!
He is a robot.
My good buddy Scott is watching. We are friends. Yes, hello, Scott Merrill. I'm here. I wanted to ask first of all, I know some folks need to bounce at about the midway point. It is the midway point. I don't know if you have comments, questions before you want to go, but if you guys need to go, that is okay. Brent, C. Michael. Want to give you that opportunity.
Aaron, I absolutely love Planet Hulk. And
thank you.
It's beautiful work. So
thank you.
Thank you for giving that to the world. And
I only gave part of it, but I do thank you very much. It's probably the thing I'm most proud of, you know, because I look at Planet Hulk as being sort of like what Simonson did with Thor. You know, it was like a generational kind of story. It was so perfect for the Hulk, and I was Carlo Paglione, who was the artist on the Hulk at the time, was not able to keep up regularly. And so Mark Panisha, who also I knew from Malibu, called me up and said, hey, do you want to do like every other story arc with this guy? Because we're doing this big project and we don't think he can keep up. And I said, yeah, of course. The Hulk, of course. I didn't know, that it was going to be so awesome when I started working on it. But yeah, it was. And I remember calling up Danny Mickey, because Matt Ryan, who my regular anchor was, he had been off working with somebody else and I couldn't get him. So I called up Danny and I was like, Danny, look, I'm doing this big Hulk project. I need someone really good to ink it. And he's like, oh, I'm too busy, man. I'm like, dude, you got to do it. It's the Hulk. It's big. You got to do it. And so he's like, all right, I'll do it. And of course, he gave it to everybody in his studio except him. And I said, look, I don't care if you give it to your like underlings, because I know they're pretty much going to ink the same way you do. I said, but you ink the splash pages. He goes, okay, deal. So, and then the last issue, I think he completely bailed. Couldn't do it, couldn't keep up. But Sandu Floria inked it. And the first couple issues before that, or actually I think it was the last story arc that Danny bailed on. And so the first couple issues, I was like, Sandu wasn't getting it. And I would talk to him and said, do this, do this. By the last issue where the Hulk actually fought the Emperor, it was like all the good stuff, just nailed it. It's a great looking issue. So we were able to kind of work the kinks out so that by the time that once Danny was gone, and then by the time that big finale, at least my finale on it, it looked really, really nice. But I appreciate you saying that. It's just, it was one of those things I just kind of lucked into and was very fortunate to be a part of.
Well, we got pretty lucky too, I guess. So. All right.
Thanks, Brent. If you got to go, head out.
Yep.
Hugs.
Thank you guys.
Have a great
See you
night.
this weekend. Later on, man.
Hey, Brent.
Hey, so I wanted to ask for to the veterans, the seasoned veterans that have been part of the big wigs and so forth. Talk about you've kind of touched on the good and the bad. Talk about that a little more. What was great about, I mean, really like the heyday, and then what was not great about the heyday, and what do you see is the future of the big two, and then maybe the comics industry in the indies. I mean, I know AT&T has hinted that DC's future is questionable. Nobody really knows, but what do you think? And that's Dean, Tommy, Aaron, Mickey, the guys that have been there and seen it. Did that question make sense?
Yeah, well,
Yes.
it's you got two different subjects there. What was it like, and then what do I think is going to happen?
Yeah.
The good and the bad. I mean, I broke in at the boom, or the tail end of the boom. So I got a couple of royalty checks that were surprisingly good, but nothing like, the legendary stuff you hear about. And they were hiring just warm bodies at the time. And so I was lucky because, like I said, I wasn't very good. I really wasn't. I was several years behind where I should have been, like, I talked about earlier, and several years before I was actually professional. So I was able to break in simply because of the amount of work that was available, and I was a warm body and I was there. But it was exciting because it was the first time I'd gone to Marvel, you know what I mean? And I got in really good with the receptionist, and she would just buzz me in without an appointment. And there's people sitting in the, in the lobby waiting to get in, and I'd come in, and because I would make trips back to New York like every 6 months. And then I would stay for a week and, bang on the door and that kind of thing. So she would just start, and I would always go up and talk to her just a ton while I was there waiting to get in. Because the first couple times I went, I had an appointment, right? After that, she knew me, and then she just like would buzz me in, and then I would just go wander around and see whose door was open. I mean, these are the kind of stories you hear people tell, right? But I was actually doing it. I remember one time I had done some work for Terry Cavanaugh. He was the first guy. I did a Marvel Comics Presents story for him. And I went in there, and like I said, I had no appointment or anything, but his door was open. So I kind of sat out in the hall. He was on the phone. So I sat out in the hall in a chair right across from his door and just sat there waiting for him to get off the phone so I could go in and bug him, right? Well, he's talking. He looks up and sees me and looks away. He looks up, I'm still there, sees me. He finally like shuts the door.
Oh, that guy's waiting on me.
I continued to, plug away and, but just walking around the offices, it was just cool. You're kind of like, oh, it's Marvel Comics. Here I am, DC was much more uptight than Marvel was at that time. So it was really, you couldn't sneak in to DC. It was very, still sort of corporate. And so someone actually had to let you in. And so it wasn't as much fun, but Marvel was, it was a riot because I was, so it was, because you grow up reading that stuff and you just dream about that possibility of actually being there someday, and there I was, scrounging for work, but people would let you in, you'd sit in and talk and blah, blah, blah. They wouldn't necessarily give you work, but you were hanging out, in the Marvel offices. And one time I was there when I was working on What The, which was the humor book, the Marvel, the parody book. And that was the only stuff I'd done from at the time. I hadn't done any superhero work or anything like that. So I'm working on this Forbish Man story, right, on a drafting table in the middle of, the offices were like all on the edges of the building. And then in the center, they had some drafting tables and stuff. And so I'm sitting there working on this What The page, right? And then right just behind me to the left on another drafting table was Tom Rainey. And he was just breaking in, but he was working on X-Men, right? So he's working on this double page X-Men thing for like Onslaught or something. And it was just really cool, and I was working on this really stupid thing, right? And everybody would walk by and they'd look at, the editors and assistant editors, they'd look at Tom's and they'd go, oh man, that's really cool. Oh, that's awesome. Blah, blah. Then they'd walk by and look over my shoulder and then just keep going. So it was like terribly humiliating, but it was still, it was really exciting at that period of time trying to break in. And it seemed like the industry was just exploding and things were going to be great. But to jump in and answer the second part, and then I'll shut up. I think AT&T is destroying DC. I think the writing's on the wall. I honestly would not be surprised if that story that came out recently, where they're saying that, fans. Well, that's not an accurate statement. I think it's Robert Kirkman, and I think Steve Jeppy is the other guy that's involved in trying. At least that's what I've heard. Of buying DC, and what they would be doing is actually licensing the comic book publishing branch, because they wouldn't be gaining the rights to the characters. Warner Brothers would still own the characters, but they would just take over the comic publishing. Whoever would jump in and do that. And I don't think that's unrealistic that that's going to happen at all. And I think what's going on at Marvel in terms of subject matter, and I'm not going to get all political on everybody, but in terms of what they're doing, subject matter with their titles, they're just destroying their books and they're destroying their audience. So I can't imagine that they're going to continue doing what they're doing for much longer, because they're just, they're hemorrhaging, other than a couple books. And a writer told me this about 4 years ago, and I thought it was really insightful. And now it seems to be coming true. He goes, you just wait. He goes, before Marvel, he said, Disney is not going to continue to publish comics. He goes, don't be surprised if they take these comics and license them out to smaller publishers to do the books, because they don't care about the books. They care about the intellectual properties, and they don't care about comics. There's not enough money in comics anyway. And so that wouldn't surprise me if something like that happened. But what alarms me most is this move towards the digital market. Because if DC goes all digital and that's their plan, and then Marvel follows suit, what's going to happen to all the comic shops and all the outlets for print media, So it may fall on the shoulders of independent publishers, like most of us are to a certain degree here. So there you go. I'm sure someone else has an opinion.
Good answer.
Yeah,
I'm gonna take it if you don't mind, and do a part one and part two. Part one of the question: what was cool about breaking in the 90s? What was really cool? I can sum it up for you. It felt like a cottage industry still, because it's pre-Hollywood.
Yeah.
So it's way before Iron Man breaks big. I mean, this is like the biggest thing is the Crow. Okay, that's it. It's even pre-Blade. There's no Blade. There's just the Crow, and that's it. And then you got your Donner Superman films that were big, and then but it's just after 1989 Batman. So there is a Hollywood presence, but it's nothing like what happened after Iron Man. So what you've got is still a cottage industry of true fans. And we loved comic books, number one. That was it. And it wasn't driven as much by this, success meant you were doing a comic book. You want to make money, you want to make a living doing it. But the page rates were like Aaron said. I mean, you're like, wow, $135 a page. Yes, and
it was some crazy money at times.
Yeah, it was. It was the creative fun of being around people who loved the material the way you did, and being able to work in that field and do the work and go to cons and personally meet the people, travel to New York, walk through Marvel and DC and see all the legendary characters, up on the wall. DC had this sculpture of Superman breaking out of the wall, I'll never forget that, and Catwoman at the time, the hot version of Catwoman was, of course, from from Batman Returns. So there was, Michelle Pfeiffer look-alike sculpture in the conference room at DC. But it was just, there was a magic to it because it was still sort of a side industry, and it was an insider type of thing, and anything was possible. The other creative fire behind the comic book industry at the time, it was about whatever you wanted to do that you thought was cool. I've quoted this before to some of you guys, but forgive me for repeating it. But one thing Todd McFarlane said in an interview one time that always stuck with me was, he didn't design Spawn because it was practical or because, they could make a live action film version of him later. Or it was like, did it look cool? Yeah. Did the costume look cool? Did it look cool to have floating chains everywhere and an impossible cape that was 40 feet long that he couldn't really fight in that cape? Man, none of that mattered, right? It was, there was no editorial limitations on it. It felt like anything goes, literally anything, whatever you want to draw, go for it. Anybody with a pencil, hey, come here, sit down, you can draw. Am I over exaggerating it, Aaron, or was that kind of the feel at the time?
That was exactly it.
Yes.
There's guys that never would have got hired in a million years if the situation hadn't been that.
Me.
If the situation hadn't been what it was,
right.
They had so many books and they needed people sitting there doing them that could actually do them in time.
Exactly.
You had to be able to do it, but anybody that could hold a pencil that could draw a face,
you got a gig.
Now, as long as you can get the work done, because people were buying the stuff. It was fun.
It was a fun time. So apart from the fun and the feeling of an insider college industry, a club, if you will, that we all were a part of, and it had just a limitless feel to it. Now, the second part of the question was, where's it going? Sadly, the business side, I think Aaron's encapsulated that and summarized it quite well. Yeah. So I'm gonna go more to the conceptual side. Here's what's killing it: calculation. Calculation is the death of creativity. It doesn't matter whether it's political calculation, whether you're targeting a demographic, whether you are, taking some sort of test market to see what color do the kids like these days. Are they into yellow more, into blue? Let's make the cape yellow. There's too much calculation, and I think part of that is the reason, the double-edged sword of the huge success of the post Iron Man Marvel Cinematic U. All of a sudden, you've got incredible, crazy money flowing because of comic books. So everybody wants to come in and get a piece of that, which makes sense. But again, suits want to calculate stuff. Well, how can we guarantee that our investment, you're going to get ROI, return on investment? Well, you can't. That's the beauty of art. You can't calculate ROI. It's a risk. All of it is a risk. You're going out into this world and you're sharing something that's genuine from the heart, right? If you're sharing something genuine from the heart, you're an artist, you're a writer, you're a penciler, inker, colorist, whatever. If it's genuine, that connects with people. There's too much calculation nowadays. It's not connecting with anyone. They're making a huge mistake. And I think it may be to those of us who are of this opinion of the independent renaissance, as I like to look at it, it's to our benefit to take advantage of their short-sightedness in that respect. They don't understand that calculation kills creativity. So
analysis
Well,
paralysis.
there's definitely an opening in the marketplace right now for good product. And just to kind of springboard off what you were saying, Dean, is I've been reading the history of the Marvel Comics, The Untold Story by Sean Howe. I don't know if you guys have read that book, but it's really interesting. And one of the things they were doing in the 70s with when Roy Thomas sort of took over an editor-in-chief and, Stan headed to LA, is they admittedly said, we had no idea what would sell. We were lost at that point. They thought the industry was going to implode by 1980. They just, kids weren't buying superheroes and stuff. So they just, let's get the license for Conan. Maybe that'll work. And let's create some monster characters. There seemed to be some interest in that. And let's throw those out there. And, they were letting like Jim Starlin and Englehart were just like, and Steve Gerber. And although Gerber apparently wasn't a big druggie, I know Englehart and Starlin were, they're dropping acid every night and going nuts and writing, the weird stuff that was going on in Captain Marvel and Warlock. And, Steve was doing his Avengers thing. And there was all this kind of weird stuff going on. And they were just kind of like, hey, the attitude was, if it sells, keep doing it. If it fails, you're fired, and that was it. It's like there wasn't a lot of editorial direction because they didn't know, and no one really knows. Just because Iron Man, like you said, was a huge success, was it a huge success because it's Iron Man, or was it a huge success because Robert Downey Jr. brought so much charm to the character and made it what it was?
I think so.
When you start trying to, encapsulate this little formula for success, you're 9 times out of 10 are going to fail. And so, there's no guarantees, and it's a hard industry. It's a tough industry because we have such a limited amount of people that actually, finite audience. It's not like a movie audience, the comic book readers, you're not going to see a lot of change and growth. You've got whatever it is, 500,000 readers, 250,000 readers, 150,000 readers. I don't even know what it is. And that's your audience. You got to get enough of those guys to pick up your book. It's less challenging when you're self-publishing because you don't have the overhead and you don't have the wholesaler. You can sell directly to the fans, but you also have to get the word out. There's no advertising. You're your own. So how many people can you reach, and how many people can you convince that they should get this book? And so, there's challenges obviously, but I think in terms of creativity, that's where you're going to find the most diverse and interesting things going on right now, is because there's a lot of, they're not just new people trying to break into the industry. There's a lot of pros that are doing it as well, because they're disillusioned by what the corporate, entity that comics has become and how it's sort of controlling the creative impulses.
Yes, it got too corporate. It got too calculated. And what the one optimistic opportunity I think we have is that we have a worldwide audience now, being broadcast digitally as we are, where that wasn't possible before. We had gatekeepers, right? And they controlled, what went out and how many people. There are no gatekeepers now. Whoever's listening to this right now, they might tell their friends, oh, this is going to be a cool, company is coming out with cool books. But the idea of the genuine creative concept that's going to resonate with the reader, no calculation. Do you think it's cool? If you think it's cool, then they will think it's cool, right? If they don't, fine, you move on to the next thing, but it's real. It's real.
That's the thing. Even Stan Lee said in interviews is, I just wrote what I thought was cool, and if I think it's cool, someone has to like it.
Right.
Right. Someone must think like me out there. There must.
I think that's one of the things that made me say yes when Roland asked me to jump on was when I heard how they source books is finds a writer like, hey, what story do you want to write? Find an artist. Hey, what story do you want to draw? Great, you guys link up.
Yeah. You guys are buddies. Yeah, Aaron, your comment about the pros just doing their own thing too is awesome. And it's tough, like with anything now, is if you don't have a following, you got to get that following. You got to build your fan base, and if you aren't a character, like a personality, it's a little, it's tough, but you can do it. It's possible. If you do, if you are the pro moving over to the indie world, I think you got a little bit of an advantage, which is fine, great. But what advice do you have for, let's say like a guy like me, like I'm trying to break into the world here. I have no bona fides. I got nothing. What's your advice?
Well, the obvious advice is don't get into comics. Are you out of your mind?
Let's just ignore that. I don't want that.
But beyond that,
other than that,
right. Well, being the independent market is I'm still exploring, because I tried to launch Garbage Man not even as an original project, just the reprint trade paperback with the new material that I'm now getting published through somebody else, and it didn't go over. And what I realized was that I just didn't have the exposure, because you're sitting there thinking before you launch it, right? You go, well, let's see, when Garbage Man came out, it didn't sell well, but it sold 19,000 copies. So there's 19,000 people out there that have heard of Garbage Man. Certainly I can get 1,500 of those people to buy. That's not that easy. And then you start to realize that what we're doing right here is such an integral part of selling your book. That, and I've talked to, over the course of the last year and a half, as I'm preparing to launch something, it's like talking to guys who are, getting it right, that are doing it right. Now, granted, there's guys that, like Sean Gordon Sean Gordon Murphy.
Sean Gordon Murphy. It's Murphy.
Yes. Yeah, who's doing his own book, and he, he's going to do over $100,000 in the indie market because he just came off doing this great big popular Batman White Knight thing, right? So he's rolling, he's hot, so that's not a concern. He doesn't have to have an internet show, 3 times a week to get people to say, "Oh, I know who that guy is." But then you take, just your average comic pro like myself, or some guy trying to break in and do something new. You've got to have exposure. That's everything. It's like we all suddenly have to be Stan Lee. We have to get out there and start marketing our books and our ideas. And the one thing I've been trying to kind of wrap my head around is that I think there's a lot of independent stuff going on or trying to go on. It seems to me that we'd be better served sort of under a similar umbrella rather than everybody off on their own, so we could kind of benefit off everybody's self-promotion, could benefit everybody else, kind of thing. I don't really know exactly how to organize that or what that would look like yet, and I also think that the price point per comic is too high for a long-term goal, but it's the necessity right now when you're only getting 500 or 600 people buying your book, or even if getting 1,500 people buying your book. In order to get a page rate, I guess you have to sell it for $25, and people are willing to do that right now. I think because there's a certain amount of novelty attached to it, and there's probably a certain amount of collectability to these books because there's such low print run. But I don't know that 5 years from now or 10 years from now, if we can still keep the industry going, if that's a model that it's going to have to change in some way, shape, or form, so that we can get product out to people more or less expensive, more affordable. Because right now it's just a couple projects here and there, and that's fine. But the more and more we try to do this, because we really have to, because Marvel and DC is just, I don't think we can count on them unless something just miraculous happens. We're kind of tasked with the idea of recreating the comics industry ourselves. So there's some stuff that has to be answered. But to answer your question, I think promotion is the number one thing, visibility. Mm-hmm. Whether that's you doing your own show, you're on YouTube, you're on Facebook all the time, that's number one. because the more people know the name of your product, even if it's not out yet, you know, it's
Right.
like Garbage Man. I've been talking about it for 2 years. So
Yeah.
when Dark
Publishing.
Oh,
We can edit that out.
Well, yeah, that's post production.
Yeah.
Tim, cut that.
Right now, we're sending people to people's houses with the little Men in Black thing.
Well, when it comes out by the publisher, now that you all know who it is, when it comes out, it shouldn't be a big mystery or as big of a mystery, right? Because I'm talking about it all the time, and I've been talking about it for a year and a half. But I don't think anybody wants to sit around. Like, I got a project that I just finished the script for. It's a monster Western superhero type thing, a total genre mashup. But it's like, do I want to sit around and talk about it for a year and a half before I launch it to give myself the best chance to, you know, that people will be ready for it when it comes out? I mean, so there's all those kind of things you have to balance. Like, when is enough promotion enough before I can actually take the chance and launch this and hope it succeeds, as opposed to jumping in too early or waiting too long. You know, it's like Dean said, I mean, we're guessing, you know, you're guessing if your product's going to sell, you're guessing if you're going to reach enough people, if something's going to resonate with it, that they're going to tell their friends and they're all going to order it, you know?
Yeah,
So I don't know what my advice is. You know, the obvious thing is you pursue your passions, and that way, if it doesn't work out, at least you've done something that you're happy with.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Because you cannot
trust your
guarantee
instincts.
success. You just can't.
Yeah, and the thing I struggle with is, I mean, this is Scott Wakefield, is just like that feeling of being despondent. Like, when you see my constant rant, and Rory knows about it. If I was some sexy muscle dude, or like Tim, or or some hot woman that does nothing but post pictures of herself, I'd have 100,000 followers on Instagram. But when you try to curate a great post, a thing, you know, an image, and you get like 7 likes, it's disheartening sometimes. But keep plugging along.
Don't give up.
It's
Don't
tough.
ever give
It's
up.
tough because you struggle. So
let me put it in perspective for you. I have 5,100 followers on Twitter. Okay.
Yeah.
I know artists that I don't even know what they've ever worked on that have like 20,000 followers. And I'm sitting here going, I drew Planet Hulk. I did Ms. Marvel. How come I can't get more than 5,000 followers on Twitter? And then you think, maybe I'll get 1% of those 5,000 to buy my book. It's like, I got to have more followers, but I can't figure out how to get them. I keep posting art and a couple more people will follow.
Yeah.
By the time I'm 80, I'll have 20,000 followers. I don't know.
You know, I just read I'm a motorcycle nut, and I get Iron and Air magazine. So if Iron and Air, you're listening, this is your free plug. Iron and Air magazine. It's a great quality. It's a quarterly. It's a nice, like 90-page.
It's really good
magazine. And this last one was their photo special. It was mostly photographs in there. It was kind of curated by one of their photographers, and he talked about it. You know, at the end of the day, success might not be your bank account, but if you look back at what you've created and what you've done, what a life. Now, that's tough. The struggle, the daily grind is tough. And to not lose heart is tough, but to be able to create, and then, like you guys are saying, you, Dean, Tommy, this kind of renaissance that's coming it's exciting, and to be a part of that, to be creating new things and throw it out there. And if it stinks, okay, don't take it personally. It wasn't meant to be.
You know, I'm
hard
kind of
not
hoping
to take it personal. It is.
Yeah, it really is. But I'm really kind of hoping that, you know, we've all been, you know, stuck in the house for the past year. You know, everybody is just ready, bursting at the seams to go do stuff. Whenever we get these shows back up and running, we're all going to have books ready to go. You know, I think let's hope that we all, you know, get that train going. You know,
it's been a good year and a bit for productivity.
It might be a good time.
But as far as where Silverline was in terms of like our growth vector in relation to when the Backstreet Boys reunion tour, as we call it, because the algorithm does not like the actual name, hit and put us all in our homes. it's kind of like just a hamstring to actual growth at conventions. Because if you're independent, you're not necessarily showing up in bookstores. You're somewhere in an aisle, and you have to like just worm your way in between the guy who was working on X-Men at the time and some other person, and trying to just throw your book at people as they walk by.
Well, you got to get good at that.
Yeah.
You've got to do it. I mean, it's the.
Yeah.
I always like doing that at the shows. I was always good at talking to
Yep.
whoever was walking by, even if they were ignoring me. Still get them to stop and just it's always when you have some good stuff on the table and you can go, well, look, this is really good, and they go, oh, it is good, and then you talk to them. But you got to get we got to get these shows going again, and then get people on the if we're selling the books through the Kickstarter store. They don't like for you to call it a store,
Right.
but we're calling it a store. I really think let's keep our fingers crossed that we can get all the shows back up and going, because I think it'll help us all.
And that the trend toward analog again is good, and I'm happy about it. Like, again, in the power sports industry, motorcycles and quads and side by sides and RVs and kayaks, and it's not power sports, but the outdoor go do stuff industry is on the rise, and it's awesome.
You guys know I'm a big mountain bike rider guy. I've got a bike, on order now that I put it in last year for a new bike to upgrade my bike, and it's not going to be here until the end of the year. That's how that's how far out the outdoor sports things people are ready to go.
And there's some weird. And there is some weird connection, because this was a niche industry, and it kind of tends right again. And power sports and outdoor sports were kind of a niche industry, and they're kind of that way again. And in those places, it really flourishes. Because after skateboarding peaked in popularity in the late '90s, it just died out in the mid 2000s, and only now people are getting their kids and skateboarding again.
Yeah.
I was out at Mount Hood snowboarding recently, and the amount of other comic writers and artists I met in line for the lift. I was like, are we just all in the same boat? Like, yeah. But,
what are we doing here? All in the same town.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's true. That is true.
I think too, Aaron, you mentioned it too, or how it works. How do you curate getting us all to work together and lift the indie industry? How do we do that? I don't know, but we need to. And I Silverline, I always mention, we reach out if you're out there creating and you want us to mention your name. I know we're not any powerhouse, but we're going to keep talking about each other, and we've got to do it. And big names out there, we'd love mention the little guys. And if you're the person with 200,000 followers, that's the key. Let's keep promoting.
Okay, well, that's not.
That's we got some updates in chat.
Okay.
So I'm going to go through those real quick. Roland had mentioned that Silverline acts like an umbrella, like Aaron was saying, and I think we're going to see a lot more companies of that sort where it's not necessarily a universe; it's a publication collective.
Yeah.
Where we were more. Scott and I are working on some of our projects, historical fiction. His a little more science fiction on both ends, like a little bit. And if we are outside of Silverline, we'd both be trying to just shell ourselves out on Twitter as much as we can. But because we have a shared collective here, we can try to cannibalize each other's audience a little bit. I think,
of course,
the more people that get together and do that, the better.
But we couldn't be in the same universe. I mean, you wouldn't be in a superhero universe, and I wouldn't be in your like real kind of historical fiction, where Steam Patriots is fantastical. But
until we do the time time jump arc,
when the portal
coming.
See, I think that's potentially problematic as well, because I think, based on what I've seen, over the not only my life as a comic reader, but then as working in the industry, fans love connected universes. They love something bigger than themselves. They can kind of get lost in the minutia of all this stuff. That's why you have Marvel zombies or DC zombies, whatever they're called. And that's the one thing that that I think is missing right now in this sort of independent market.
Absolutely.
Is everybody doing, basically what we're doing is we're selling graphic novels, self-contained story, which are good in terms just from being able to read a story and, you know, be done with it. And then maybe there'll be more, maybe there won't be. But I do think that your traditional comic book reader likes that sense of
connectivity.
How is Fantastic Four relating to Spider-Man, or how, you know, you have
The
these different
relationship.
characters that they're not crossing over every issue, but you know, they sort of exist in the same, you know, as Stan Lee said in this book I'm reading, I thought it was interesting. He was like, you know, unlike DC, where they would put Superman in Metropolis and Batman was in Gotham and Flash was in Central City or whatever, you know, there was kind of these made up towns that weren't, but he said, all of our characters were in New York City.
Right.
So
Yeah.
how in the world could they not be running into each other
Yeah.
once in a while, you know? And so when he started doing that, it became this novel thing that people really dug. They thought, this is really cool, you know? And that Silver Surfer may be in the Fantastic Four, but he could eventually affect Spider-Man, or he could eventually, you know, somebody else, Warlock or Captain Marvel. Right. And so I do like that. And I'm not sure how to solve that problem in the way this independent with this Kickstarter or Indiegogo platform, the way that we're doing things right now, how that can be solved. But I do think it's important. It may be important to the longevity of it, unless people are this just becomes a new, you know, comics just evolved to the point where it is just kind of separate graphic novels and people accept that and go with that. But
Yeah.
I think
yes.
Aaron, you're perfectly, you are 100% correct. And I think Marvel with the movies did it really well, bringing everybody in. And yeah, Tim, you can talk to, like, there is going to be a core of Silverline titles that
are together. Yeah, we have our I don't even know what we're calling the universe, just New Orleans, but I am a huge X-Men nerd, and the weird stuff they do in there to get away with things. If we were to do a volume 2 and there was a time portal in colonial America that jumped into World War II England, you know I would be down.
So good.
So
good.
Yeah, Silverline. Yeah, Silverline will have its universe of superheroes and action heroes. Yeah. And then some of the other the stories that just are under the Silverline umbrella. But you're right. It's seeing the world. And I don't know where it fell apart, because my comic book knowledge is choppy. I feel like Marvel used to do a really good job of their continuity, and they'd mention, oh, this is just like Spider-Man did, and they'd say with an asterisk, see
such and such a book.
Caption box down there.
Yep. And then it flew apart. I don't know at what point, and I could be wrong. That's what
X-Men. X-Men. It fell apart with X-Men. Because X-Men, all of a sudden, it was like Captain Wolverine being 10 books at the same time, and they were doing this over here, and this over here, and this over here. Yeah.
And then they decided to acknowledge that they're just a messed up universe. So we have Battle World, where you just see the fact that none of this makes sense, and that's the point.
Yeah.
No, DC in the comics, DC was always more control the universe oriented, and Marvel was just like, hey, if it's cool,
it's fun to have fun.
Yeah.
But what happened was they had less titles to worry about in the 60s and 70s, and it was easier to keep track of. But even then, you know, Stan said that if you look at, I think it's Avengers 16, where they had the new lineup, right? And it was Scarlet Witch and Quicksilver and Giant Man and the Wasp and Cap and Hawkeye. It was just like really a lame Avengers lineup. And the reason is because and this was 1966. You know, when they did that, it was like, he goes, it was too hard with just the 8 titles they had. It was too hard keeping Thor and Iron Man and
the Hulk.
Who else was in there? The Hulk, you know, whoever else was in the Avengers. What they were doing in the Avengers, in conjunction with what they were doing in their own book, it was just like too much of a hassle. So that's why he pulled all the major characters out and put in the lame second
stringers. Yeah.
Right. So they didn't have to worry about that sort of continuity.
Yeah.
But also what happened in the 90s is when Martin Goodman sold off the company, the Marvel in the 70s, right? And then it just got sold and got sold and got sold and got sold, and it became more and more corporate. And pretty soon in the 90s, what was happening was, and Terry Stewart was in charge, although he wasn't really in charge. Perlman and these other guys, Icon and all those guys they didn't care about anything except profit margin.
Mm-hmm.
And so they were making these guys put Wolverine and everything. They were making them do this stuff that they didn't want to do.
Yeah,
but they had no
were appearing in
choice.
books that they didn't have anything to do with, and they were
right. It was like this book.
Wolverine walks through. There's Wolverine.
Right. Well, it's like this book has to sell X amount of copies, or I'm in trouble. That's what an editor was faced with. So that he'd say, okay, we'll put Ghost Rider in there, or Wolverine, and I'll make sure we'll sell X amount of copies, and I won't get in trouble. So it was a totally different environment than it was in the 70s, when guys were just like, let's see what if we make Warlock do this, or let's Shang-Chi, and it was it was more of a creative, let's try some Howard the Duck. It was just like, let's try some interesting things and see what happens. Where in the 90s, it was like, this has to sell this many copies or you're fired, and you're like, what do you do? Well, you put Wolverine in it, or Punisher, or whoever's hot. And so you destroy the industry long term to get some short term capital gains. That's going to make whatever mogul that happens to own Marvel at the time happy. And so it was very, those guys they had no interest in comics. They had no idea what comics were. They were just interested in the spreadsheets and the bottom line, and the industry paid a great price for it. But that's what happens. These companies are great when they're small, but then anybody who owns a small company, your big dream is, right, to sell it for several millions of dollars and retire, right? You're not thinking about what you're doing to the employees or the rest of the industry you may be a part of. It's just kind of like, and I think that's what everybody's mentality was. Marvel and DC were independently owned companies, and they just sold for millions of dollars, and somebody was pretty happy with it, and then the rest of us that worked in the industry had to kind of ride the roller coaster of what that means when that stuff becomes, like you said, from being a cottage industry to just these corporate giants controlling it.
Yeah, and now Mickey Mouse owns Marvel. Isn't that weird?
Yeah.
Yeah.
When are we gonna get the Mickey Mouse Hard the Duck crossover? So on the chats, Roland is trying to guilt Aaron into do a cover for us. Hyper Potato on YouTube says, I bet Dean Zachary would draw a great Sergeant Rock.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And someone else, or the same person, I'm going to read this word for word because I think it's kind of hilarious how they qualify this. Will Garbage Man be a hardcover when this mystery publisher, who has totally not been mentioned or hinted at, puts it out?
It's gonna be a big book, right? It's not little.
No,
it's not
I wouldn't hold your breath for that. Although I don't really know, to be honest with you. My guess is that, it's funny. Everybody's like, I don't do a hardcover, it's too expensive. Well, it doesn't cost that much more to print a hardcover than it does a soft cover. It really doesn't. But your price point for selling is much higher. And my guess would be that it's going to be a paperback, and if it blows up, maybe they go in and do a hardcover. But I don't know that for a fact what they're planning on doing. It's a different market in the sense that, since it's a trade paperback, they're not publishing floppies and saying, okay, we're losing money on the floppies, but we're going to collect them in a trade paperback and then sell that and break even. This is starting as a trade paperback, right? So their focus is as much on bookstores or booksellers as it is the comic book market, right? So that's one of the reasons why the book is, it's essentially done with it. It's still being put together in production, but everything's done, right? But it's not going to come out till October, November, because you have to have such a huge leeway from when you solicit it to when it actually comes out from book publishers. Okay, the book publishing market is completely different than the comic market. And so they have to cater to the book publishing market. So there's a catalog that goes out to book buyers, and then there's a catalog that goes to Diamond, right? And they're not the same thing. And so the book publishers get like 8 months in advance, whereas Diamond is 3 months in advance, right? For comic shops. So even though it'll be coming out at the same time, they have to say, well, in order for this book to just be out by November, we have to have it solicited to the book buyers by March.
Yeah.
You know, so it was just impossible when we cut this deal. It was impossible to like get it out in June or get it out in May, because we came to this agreement last fall, right? And there still had to work to be done on to get the Batman stuff taken out and the new stuff put in. And I'm way ahead of schedule, but with that 8-month lead time for the bookstores, there's just, you know, the earliest it can come out is at the end of 2021. So, and that's kind of how it's going to be. But to answer the question, I don't have any idea. I would guess it's just going to be a paperback.
Sure.
Because it's not like it's, you know, this mega selling property that they're like, oh my gosh, we got this, you know, let's maximize it by doing a really cool hardcover. My guess is it's going to be a paperback because it'll be just cheaper.
Hey, Aaron, thank you for staying with us. We're getting towards the end of the show here. If everybody's okay with it, we'll start our good nights. Okay. And we'll give you the last word, Aaron. I want you to plug what you've got going on. I know you got a book on your site that's for sale, of your artwork and so forth. So shamelessly plug, please.
I will.
So I will start the good nights, and then I'll wrap up at the very end. Again, my name is Scott Wakefield, and Steam Patriots is coming out sometime soon. I'm co-writer, co-creator with my good buddy Rory Boyle down there. And as always, folks out there, if you have something you want us to help promote, if you want to help promote our products and our books, we would love to help each other out. We love the indie world, and let's lend a hand where we can. I'm going to go over to Dean and then down to Tommy and Rory and Tim. So Dean, say goodnight.
Good night, everybody. Dean Zachary signing off. Keep your eyes out for the upcoming Silverblade. Enjoyed it.
All right. Tommy.
Just look for me. Just punch in Florimonte, FLORIMONTE, mostly on Facebook, but you can find me elsewhere. Or go to infernostudios.com, and you'll find me.
All right.
Florimonte.
We'll find you. Thank you, Tommy. Rory, go for it.
Rory Boyle here, wishing you all a good night. You can find me wherever you can find Scott. Everything at Steam Patriots on the book and the gram.
Because you live in his backyard.
Because I live in his backyard.
Yeah.
Throw a snowball soon.
Tim, go for it.
I am Tim TK. You can find me at Tim TK Writer on all the socials. I'm also on TikTok at Tim Doesn't TikTok, where I talk about the crossroads of punk rock and literature. I'm also on Twitch at AgroBacon, where I'll be going live with some Destiny later tonight, and on the Silverline website with our craft series. And also, someone brought it up, but Wolf Hunter coming out later.
Yes.
Later.
Soon.
And your beard has been getting progressively shorter.
Later.
Yeah.
The beard actually goes into the inks.
Tim TK, our resident Renaissance man from video games to literature. Thank you, Tim. And before I forget, Daytona Beach Comic Con, thank you so much for supporting and sponsoring our live streams. And before I forget, we have a live stream on Sunday night as well. That is 9 to 11 p.m. And Mr. Roland Mann is here. He has graced us again. I think he might be able to tease what's coming up Sunday night. Go for it, Roland.
It's more than a tease.
All right.
Quick reminder that me and Aaron Humphreys will be on with OCD Drinking with Gas tomorrow night. Sunday night, we are going to continue our Silverline guest theme week, and gracing us Sunday night will be none other than, drumroll please. There you go. Alex Saviuk, who many know for drawing Spider-Man for a long time. So we are looking forward to chatting with Alex, much like the Whammers did here with Aaron. Aaron, can I reach out to you and invite you to hang out with us again sometime?
Absolutely. This has been fun. I really enjoyed talking with you guys.
Good.
Oh, you should see some of the
Conversation.
other stuff that we talk about. You may change your mind.
Yeah. Well, the only thing I've got that I can plug is this sketchbook, which is on my website. But I am on Facebook at Aaron Lopresti. I'm at Twitter at Aaron Lopresti. I am on MeWe at Aaron Lopresti. I'm on Instagram at Aaron Lopresti. If you can spell my name, you can find me. And this is a hardcover. It has a spine. Self-published. There's my little logo right there. Cold Crocodile Press. And 64 pages of goodness. I've got some projects coming up, but they're not going to see fruition probably until the first of the summer. I'm actually sadly going in for rotator cuff surgery next week, so I'm going to be not drawing for a month. So that's going to be. I broke my arm when I was a sophomore in high school, and that's the last time.
And you're just now getting it fixed.
So I'm, a little distressed about that, but yeah. So that it's an injury that's been bugging me for years, and doctor's like, dude, if you don't get this thing fixed, you're gonna end up with a shoulder replacement. I'm like, okay, that sounds worse.
Yeah. Wow. So you're going to be going on a blog tour, on a video tour while you're out with your arm, right? You're going to.
That's all I'm going to do is promo because I can't do anything else. So
excellent. You've been drawing handicap for so long that when you get it back, it's just going to be so much better.
Just think how fast you're going to be.
Twice the speed.
That's right, man. It's amazing. Practice with my left hand.
Aaron, it has been an honor.
Your fastball is going to be amazing.
Yep.
I've seen the movie, that the documentary where the kid gets the what was that movie? I can't remember the title. Oh well. Okay. Aaron, it has been an honor to have you here with us. Thank you.
Thank you, guys. I appreciate you having me. It was a real pleasure getting.
I feel like we barely
some old friends as well.
We barely scratched the surface. We talked a lot about industry stuff. I wanted to talk. I had the idea that we'd get into craft. We'll save that for the next time you're available. And we would love to talk the craft and the work that goes into creation. I always say that I'm surrounded by greatness. I'm just kind of herding the cats here, and you guys have so much wisdom that I love to help impart to the world. To our viewers out there, thank you for joining us. If you are not watching this live, go ahead and comment still. We try our best to hop on and see comments and questions. It's a great opportunity for you to ask questions to us. We can get the answers from the guys and from our other Silverliners out there. Some of the folks had to head to bed. We get it. Haley, Brent, C. Michael, Mickey. We love you all. Thank you for being part of the show. And thank you all for supporting Silverline. SilverlineComics.com. You can check out our titles there. Order those from Indie Planet. And keep an eye out for upcoming Kickstarters and all of our new titles as we keep making great stuff. That's all I have. And I'm going to say goodnight. Thank you, Aaron. And as always, make mine.
Silverline.
Silverline.